Atonement for Me, Episode 10, Miscarriage. Hey magical misfits, it's Kaidain Ivy and welcome to Atonement for Me. So you might want to grab some tea for this episode, seeing as it's a little bit more on the emotional burden side of things, but it's something that has definitely influenced many of my designs and is an issue that I have been discussing with quite a few of my friends recently. And it's something that we hear about so infrequently for how frequently it occurs. And that is losing a baby or miscarrying. So, when I brought the subject up with many of my friends, I couldn't believe how many of them told me that they'd had one or more miscarriages and or abortions. And that shocked me because it was something so common and yet something we never hear about or have resources to educate yourself with or about. And it's something that, as a woman, is terrifying, whether you've experienced it or not. And it's something that is so difficult to handle because how are you even supposed to feel? I understand it happens all the time. The amount of things that have to go right to carry a child full term is nothing short of miraculous. And to be able to see how many people there are in this world, look at how many miracles are walking around. That's crazy. But on the flip side of that, one thing goes wrong, and that terminates the whole process. So logically, in my head, I can say it's just what happens. That's just nature. I have made it no secret that I don't particularly want children at this point in my life. I've said for almost all of my life that I don't want kids because the thought terrifies me. But that doesn't mean that being on that emotional roller coaster of finding out that you're pregnant and then losing it, or finding out that you were pregnant as you were losing a child. Just because I don't want to be in that scenario doesn't mean that it isn't going to affect me. That I'm not going to feel some kind of way about it because it's still a connection. You still had life in you. Your body still had to go through changes. And people seem to think that it only affects you if you go full term. But if you've lost a child anywhere along the ways, you were still pregnant, you still had all of that. Except for at the end of it, you're just expected to pick up and carry on as if nothing happened, as opposed to being a mom And for me, looking at an ultrasound, that's the first time I've ever seen anything blood related to me on an ultrasound, or something that you disposed of. It was still the only blood relative I'd ever seen. And I have never known how to feel about that. And I've barely talked to anybody about it because I don't even know where to start. I was so scared and vulnerable and ashamed when I was put in those positions. That there was just so much to process that I didn't even recognize half of the things that I was feeling or that were sitting with me. And bringing that to other people and hearing my female friends expressing the same feelings, the same shame, the same confusion, the same guilt. Even if you didn't want to be pregnant, all of these things still weigh on you. And I never wanted to tell my family because I was too scared and ashamed and confused. And I didn't want to let them down. Especially my mom. Because she loves kids. And she loves all of the kids in her life who are cousins or friends that I grew up with, their kids. She considers them all her grandkids, and they bring her so much joy. And to see her light up when they call her Nana, and to see how much that means to her, that I felt like I failed in not being able to give that to her. I felt like I failed at being a woman, because biologically that's what we're built for. So how could I tell her that? How could I explain to her that I had lost something that she values so greatly? And I've heard so much of that same shame from so many of my friends. And a lot of my friends have told me how they told their parents. And some of the responses were so cold, so matter of fact, so dismissive. as if the only way a pregnancy counts is if you give birth to a live child. Because you're treated like you don't matter if you didn't. I was supposed to go for a checkup after I'd had a miscarriage, and the doctor, he kind of just looked at me and he was just like, oh, well, I'm supposed to technically examine you, but do you have any fever or any pain? Any other symptoms? No, you're fine. And I was just dismissed as if I was coming for a prescription refill. And nobody mentioned to me how my body would change, or how to cope mentally, or how long it would take for your emotions to settle out, or your hormones, or things that you need to do after. And so many other women face that same confusion. Because it seems to be that elephant in the room that nobody wants to address. And listening to my parents list off all of the people they know who are having kids or more kids, and hearing that wistfulness in my mom's voice breaks me. Because I don't have that to offer to her. You just pick up and pretend it didn't happen. Don't tell anybody, just quietly keep going. Go to work the next day because you gotta put food on the table. Because there's so many other things that are going on in life that are more important. But it's just a random fact of life of being a woman, being a female, that we're told to just accept. And that's just the way it is. No explanation. No support. And to my sisters who I've been talking about this to recently, I hear you and I share your tears. And I know that fear, that confusion, that shame, that overwhelming sense of grief and loss, and the confusion as to what you're mourning for. I know what it's like to mention it on the phone to your family and have them say, yeah, that's just the way it is. That happens sometimes. But how I've dealt with that confusion, that shame, that just weight on my soul has gone into my designs in little tiny ways. And you may not be able to unpick it if you see it, but now you know it's there. And that's just the tea.